IsitObservable. We are here live from Las Vegas at Dynatrace Perform. My name is Henrik Rexed. I'm a cloud native advocate, and I'm the host, as you may know, of the show IsitObservable. So here I am, have the honor to be here live from Dynatrace Perform. And if you did pay attention, I initially planned 2 live streams. Of course, we had some few technical issues. We call it the internet and the speed of the internet. Yeah, if you don't have the right network connections, it's quite a challenge to run some live stream. So, what is Dynatrace Perform? You probably ask yourself. Well, Dynatrace Perform is the Dynatrace user conference that runs in 2 days. And in fact, this year at Dynatrace Perform, there was lots of amazing announcements. And I'm going to run through a couple of updates with a couple of interviews that I had the chance to run with different product managers, with partners, and so on. But Dynatrace Perform is actually 4 days. The 2 first days of Dynatrace Perform is what we call the hot days. During those 2 hot day sessions, all the clients has the chance to go in training sessions or workshops where they're going to cover technical content related to specific module or specific areas related to Dynatrace. And in fact, this year I had the chance to present and run my own hot day sessions with a couple of colleagues covering advanced cloud monitoring with Prometheus, with OpenTelemetry, with FreeBit, so topics that are in my heart. So if you want to basically get more details about the hot test sessions, I had the chance to meet Melissa. So Melissa is one of the person that managed and organized all those hot test sessions. So let's have a look at the interview that I had with Melissa.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. So maybe you can introduce yourself to the community.
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely. I have been with Dynatrace almost 9 years, primarily working with the Dynatrace University team, a little bit of services before that, and I have a career in the IT industry for about 20 years.
So you're managing mainly the hot days. So the first, for those who are not aware what the hot days, it's prior to perform. There is 2 days where we have different training sessions. So how many sessions do we have this year?
So this year we had 20 sessions running over the 4 time slots of the 2 days. So folks had the opportunity to take up to 4 while they were here, so 2 each day. So
and how many students were part of those sessions?
We had a record number of almost 600 people this year. And they filled about 1,400 seats, which equals about 1,400 environments that we're running as well.
And then so the hot day, I guess it's been like a tradition with Perform. So did you have the history? When did it actually start?
I do have a little bit of the history. So it started, the first one I was involved with was 2015. It was our last year in Orlando. We used to do Perform in October. And we've been running it every year since. We used to only do 1 day. So it was 1 day where you could do an AM and a PM class. And it's gotten so popular that we now do the 2 days. My understanding is originally it was part of an early version of Perform. It was almost like a user group / conference. And the SE team started to do a little bit of training involved in it. And then it's grown to what it is today.
But behind Perform those sessions, and I've been involved in one of the sessions, there are a lot of environments behind the scene. So there's a lot of hard work. So could you maybe walk through the process? Because at the end, it's not just 20 sessions, it's more than that. So maybe there's a lot of things behind the scene going on.
Yeah. So we start pre-planning generally in the beginning of summer, talking about what sessions we want to offer, which Dynatrace experts are coming back to get involved in it again. We have about 90 that were involved this year to do all that hard work behind the scenes, whether it was putting content together, developing the lab guides, the exercises, and we also have the engineering lab teams at Dynatrace that are involved in helping with the environments and making sure they run smoothly. So it's several months of work that comes together to give those great 2 days.
So in terms of infrastructure, do we have an idea on how many Dynatrace tenants we are basically sharing and how many, probably demo applications, because behind the scene you need the exercise with demo applications. So do you have any numbers to share?
I do. We had about 662 environments running on Monday and about 830 on Tuesday over 76, or they were deployed over 3 different AWS regions to make sure we had good coverage there. And that does not account for there's the EK clusters that we're also running as part of it.
Wow, so that's quite a lot. So I guess there's a lot of preparations, and also I guess all the scripts to deploy all those environments runs way in advance to make sure that everything is smooth for the first sessions on Monday.
Exactly, and that's part of why we try to encourage everybody to register as early as they can, because we definitely take advantage of automation to spin everything up and make sure it's ready to go the day of.
And running all those 20 sessions, I guess there's always some surprises or things that goes wrong or something that not expected. So do you have any surprising stories to share?
Let's see. Well, I will say the very first, I think it was 2015, it might have been 2017, we had an AWS outage, or AWS had an outage. And so we had to kind of work with that on the fly. As far as this year, it went pretty smoothly. We did have some challenges with the Wi-Fi. I mean, that is a lot of data going over the network that has to be ready to handle it. So we had a little bit of slowness here and there, but thankfully everybody worked really well together, and even our attendees were understanding in us getting that taken care of.
And do you have any, I guess we are asking feedback from our students, and I think, I'm pretty sure that you already have seen some feedbacks. Do you have in overall positive feedbacks from this year's session?
Yeah, we've been getting some great feedback. We hope to continue to get more feedback on all the sessions, but so far everybody's said it's been very helpful. They've been able to give great examples of how they're going to take what they learned and immediately apply in their business when they return from the conference. So it's been positive. They said the instruction was great. We've got folks who have come to 4 or 5 years of Perform and have said these are the best ones yet. So it's been very positive feedback.
And if you had, because part of 20 sessions, there are probably topics that bring more interest at Perform. So what do you have? What are the sessions that were the most popular?
So the Power Dashboarding class has been the most popular every year. We always get a lot of folks interested in that. The Mastering Dynatrace Configuration has been a really big one. And of course, this year we had sessions that involved Grail, so those were very popular as well.
Okay, and OpenTelemetry was something also important?
Yes, the OpenTelemetry is also one that rates very high up there.
All right. So, I think that's a great opportunity for people coming here at the Dynatrace Perform to also get some technical content out of those 2 days of conference.
Yes. They get an opportunity to work with all of you Dynatrace experts in those sessions on the technology and, come away from their new announcements and the releases along with education that they can immediately apply to their.
So thanks a lot for your hard work, because I think without having you managing everything, probably the session won't be running as smoothly as it's been running here. So thanks for the effort, and thanks for referring that to the customers.
Well, I appreciate that. It takes everybody. I won't take full credit. All of us together is what pulls it together. So thank you.
Right. Thanks.
Great.
And from those 20 sessions that Melissa just described, I had another colleague, Kristof Renders, who is working for the innovation, services, so providing a lot of service to automate, to deliver quality gates. And he also was running one of the Hotdays sessions. And in fact, more than just one Hotdays session, he also presented a breakout session this year at Perform. So let's see the interview with Kristof.
Yeah, sure. So, hi everybody. I'm Kristof. I'm heading up the innovation services team here at Dynatrace. Been with the company for a very long time. Always working with customers. So very customer facing, making sure that customers are making the most of their Dynatrace investment and taking them on that journey. And now coming up with new innovative ways for our customers to leverage the platform.
So innovation of services. So what does it actually mean for the customers?
Yeah, for sure. So everybody who knows Dynatrace, they know the great value in the data that it provides, right? Answer-driven automation is kind of in our tagline, right? So we want to make sure that this data is indeed leveraged for innovative ways. So we come up with new ways that our customers can use this data. So thinking about automatically validating releases, right? When you're doing software development based on the data that Dynatrace has, right?
So if you do automatic validating releases, are you referring, for example, of the usage of solution like Captain and the module cloud automation?
Yeah, exactly. My team was really on the forefront of bringing that kind of technology to customers, and then also driving our product innovation that we now see in cloud automation with our customers.
And more than just cloud automation, do you also help customers to enable remediations or auto-remediation processes?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we do. So we work with a lot of technology partners in doing that, and so we want to make sure that when a problem happens, and it's reality, right? Problems do happen, that our customers can drive that mean time to repair as low as possible by taking the data and the context that Dynatrace has about a problem to trigger an automated remediation to solve that problem as quickly as possible.
So if we are here today at Vegas, it's just not to play in the casino. I guess there's a purpose. So could you reveal a bit what your presence? Do you have any sessions that you are going to present soon? Could you give us some details?
Yeah, for sure. The first thing that I'm here for, and actually a lot of customers come here for to perform, is our hands-on training sessions. They're already over. That was yesterday and the day before, where we had, I think it was about 20 or so different sessions where customers could learn about our platform and take something home, right? Basically, when they come back from Vegas, implement that in their own environment. So that was the first reason why I was here. And the other reason is I'm talking tomorrow at a breakout on developer productivity, right? So DORA metrics and how Dynatrace can help organizations by measuring their productivity and get better at developing and releasing software.
In fact, I'm preparing it should be released in a few hours.
Yeah. Oh.
A dedicated episode on the Captain Lifecycle Toolkit.
Yeah.
So you mentioned DORA, and I know that Captain, the KLT, is also providing lots of simple way of providing those DORA metrics.
Yeah.
So in your particular case, I guess you don't necessarily rely on a Captain Lifecycle Toolkit for the customers. So what is the journey to bring the customers to the maturity of having the DORA metrics?
Yeah, this is a very, very good question. So as part of the innovation team, we organize frequent hackathons, right? So we see and we look at the market and we get questions on, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? And one of the questions that came up from one of our customers was, can you measure the efficiency of my Jenkins environment? So how well am I at releasing software, at running my pipelines? So my team got to work and we built a prototype to do exactly that, right? So we're getting the data from the CI/CD platform, in this case Jenkins, right? Bring it into Dynatrace, and by doing so, right, enable all the goodness that comes with it. So we can start baselining, creating trends, and just act upon the data. Is there a team that is, maybe having a regression in their pipeline duration, or are there pipelines and steps that fail more frequently than others? These kind of insights allow organizations to get better at developing and releasing software.
So Kristof Renders mentioned about auto remediation. And auto remediation, you can do, there's plenty of solutions out there doing it. In fact, one of the Dynatrace partner, Red Hat, has different solutions, and one of them is Ansible. Ansible of course, can run a playbook to run your auto remediation. And we had the chance to meet one of the employees of Red Hat, Kevin. He talks about the Ansible and the auto remediation. And I was the honor to have this interview with Mark Tomlinson. So if you never heard about Mark is the previous founder of PerfBytes, and he's going to start a new show. So check it out. He's going to be soon available. So you check on YouTube, you will see on Mark Tomlinson's new show.
So my name is Kevin Holmes. I'm a Nashville-based solution architect within Red Hat. I'm on a team that's referred to as the ISV ecosystem team. Essentially, we work closely with independent software vendors, Dynatrace very specifically. We've got a great relationship with the counterparts on the Dynatrace side, working with integration. So I'm an Ansible specialist. Within Red Hat, I've been very focused on Ansible as a solution. I work closely with engineering, so I'm not necessarily the smartest person in the room, but I surround myself with smart people to make
If
sure
you
that
made it into this room, you're smart. Seriously.
Fair enough.
Have you talked to him for 5 minutes?
Fair enough.
So,
But yeah, I work closely with the partners in the integration. We've been working closely on the Dynatrace auto remediation. Easy for me to say. Auto remediation solutions around Ansible automation, which is fantastic in its own light. Dynatrace is head of its class, and when you put the two together, give them a very special hug. Fantastic things happen.
Cool.
So you mentioned Ansible and auto remediation, and this is a topic I love because especially when you deal with observability, at the end you will get alerts, and it's great to have been alerted, but sometimes you want to do something out of the alerts.
Yeah.
So what is? Do you have any tips or recommendation if someone wants to say, "Hey, I love remediation, but it's just very complicated to set up"?
Yeah. So my prescriptive stance from this is very much, and they say to a nail or to a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So to an Ansible fanatic, everything starts with an Ansible playbook. There are a number of ways to come at this. There are different ways to approach this, but my prescriptive stance is from a day one, building things out within an Ansible playbook, having a prescriptive set of a desired state. So I have an Ansible playbook that says I want to build out this application based on these parameters,
Right.
and when I build that, I can then apply or reapply that through idempotency. What this gives me is then when Dynatrace detects an anomaly, it can go back and say, well, I need to launch an Ansible playbook to put this back in the desired state. We already have that built. So it's not an extra lift. And the reason I talk about this is sort of a day one. If people don't have this, they can actually put the extra effort in and build that playbook to remediate after the fact.
So, but it means at the end you have to sort of list all the potential errors and problems that you can potentially face, and then list, okay, this is a problem related to my front end, about the disk, whatever, or the memory. So then you will have to design the right playbook for that specific problem.
Yes, however, when one of the the amazing things about this integration, so when Dynatrace says we've discovered a problem, there are additional parameters for that problem that are sent, a number of, it's sort of think of it as a payload with the API. So
Sure.
when Ansible receives this alert, it says we're auto-remediating based on all this information. Ansible can then parse through those parameters that were sent and oftentimes determine, because an Ansible playbook isn't just a static piece of code, it's almost a living, breathing, it's evaluating these parameters that are sent. So Dynatrace, this could be very simple, could be very complex, where the Ansible playbook says, oh, look, we have these three parameters that are, and again, it's written based on things that we predict, but different parameters might be in place depending on the different types of failure. So whatever that anomaly is, Ansible can evaluate as it goes and even make additional decisions based on that.
Cool.
Okay.
So does that, you're using like a webhook integration through alerting profiles and things? How does Dynatrace actually make the hook in and then bringing it home to the Red Hat world?
Yeah.
There's a much larger world outside of Ansible to like, you could extend the auto remediation
Sure.
through Ansible because Ansible has the access to all of that.
Well, and so it's a great question, and I'm fighting the urge to talk about event-driven Ansible, event-driven automation, because it's something we're announcing today. In fact, 2:15.
Oh, you announced it live on the internet.
No.
Everyone knows.
Everyone knows that it's coming, but we're speaking to this. So, event-driven automation, event-driven Ansible.
Cool.
It's an additional. So, let me break this into two simple. The current integration, the pre-EDA
Right.
solution involves a hook, even back to the previous version of Ansible, before Ansible Automation Platform, Ansible Tower.
Oh, yeah.
We had an API hook
Yep.
that Dynatrace would send some information there.
Right.
So when we talk about webhooks and additional evaluative, is that a word?
Yeah, it is now.
Evaluative. I'm going to use it.
No, you should. If you do it with conviction, then everyone will say, well, wow,
It's
that's
a
a new
perfectly
word.
cromulent
Here,
word. I'm
Kevin said
using
that.
it.
That's a new word.
Coined it today. I'm going to go get the .com just in case it's available. But there are additional steps through event-driven automation where we can take additional sources then. So maybe Dynatrace says this is broken, but we have some other statistic or Red Hat Insights or other sources
Right.
that give us different information. So we can now have evaluation within that event-driven Ansible that can
Yeah.
go deeper into that.
So
skills.
Very interesting to see what we can do with Playbook and how to start putting the automation. But again, here on this channel, we talk a lot of Kubernetes, and I had the chance and the honor to meet in person Kelsey Hightower. Wow, that was very impressive. And in fact, Kelsey is a great person. I really loved it. So we briefly had a short interview. And he talks about what his new projects, what he's doing at the moment. So let's hear about Kelsey.
Hi, Kelsey. It's an honor to have you on the show. So Kelsey, first of all, you are a distinguished engineer at Google. So what are the current things that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so a lot of people may know me from the Kubernetes world. If this was 8 years ago, you would have known me from the Golang programming world. A few years before that, you would have known me from configuration management, where I was an engineer working on Puppet, DevOps and automation tools. And these days, as of maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I made a pivot to the serverless world. And I remember when Kubernetes was really hot topic. I mean, it's still new, and we're all about containers. And the serverless people like, you guys are going backwards. And I'm like, really? What are you doing instead? And they showed me like the serverless functions, and these two worlds could not be further apart. But what I found was in the serverless world, especially in the classical definition, functions as a service, event-driven architectures, and there's nothing wrong with that architecture, but I don't think it's suitable for every workload. For example, I don't know if I would try to re-implement Jira, the issue tracker, bug tracker system, as a collection of functions responding to events. I think there's nothing wrong with that being largely a monolithic binary connected to a database. And so all of this stuff in the Kubernetes world, we have this amazing platform where we can do resource scheduling. We finally have an API for designing workloads. And for a lot of people, their only workload abstraction that they knew at the time was virtual machines, auto-scaling group, a load balancer, and the thing that tied it all together was configuration management tools. Pick your poison. Puppet, Chef, for Ansible. And then people would then glue together these ad hoc platforms. And if you're really fancy, maybe you would go buy Cloud Foundry and try to shoe in all your apps into the 12-factor pattern. So there was something there between Kubernetes and this PaaS world. And so at Google, we decided, look, there should be a container native primitive. And maybe a lot of people don't know this story, but the App Engine team, one of the first original services at Google, they're the ones that decided that given the popularity of Kubernetes, what would happen if you were to reimagine App Engine, right? Very similar to something like Heroku, using the Kubernetes API. And eventually it will go on to be called Knative. And if you look at what Knative is, it's the pod spec that you know from Kubernetes, but it brings in some additional machinery, this concept of scaling to zero. Well, how do you scale to zero? Well, you do that by being in front of the traffic. And so the load balancer and the autoscaler have a really tight relationship. So when a request comes in, you can then tell Kubernetes, scale that pod up to handle this request that I'm going to then attach to the load balancer. And then if there are no requests, you know what to do. You scale it to zero by then talking to Kubernetes. And so that goes on to become Knative. But there's something missing here. Putting serverless on top of Kubernetes means you have to have a cluster. And in my professional opinion, once you have a cluster, the operational model is assumed by whoever's running the cluster. And so we decided at Google to get rid of the Kubernetes layer, but keep that new workload definition and run it as a managed service, aka Cloud Run. And so the last couple of years, there's a part where we thought Cloud Run should just be super simple. You take a container, you scale it from 0 up. But it turns out if you want to run a real application, there's something called like the in-memory cache. Some apps benefit from having 512 megs, 2 gigs of cache to serve requests really quickly. And so that means scaling to 0 is an implementation detail. Scaling to 0 is a good way of saving money when you're not using a service. But a lot of times it makes more sense during peak time to leave the app running.
Because there's always a starting time. So that was saying it's from 0 to 1. It always takes, it's not instantly. You still have the time to load just the image that is inside of that Knative image or service. So I think you mentioned depending on your design, Knative doesn't necessarily help you, I guess. Do you have a suggestion on when Knative would be useful and when it should not be useful?
0 to 1 is a very hard problem in computing. When you have nothing and to go to 1 really quickly is very hard. Going from 1 to 2 is much easier. If you have no machines in your cluster, that means you would have to provision a machine first, configure it, attach it, and then run the workload. That's too hard. And so this is why even in the Kubernetes world, there tends to be a base set of machines. Mm-hmm. In the Knative case, if you have a real-time order, someone wants to give you money on your website, they are not waiting for Knative to spin up a pod instance. Even if it does it fast, it may be too slow to handle that request, especially if the logic to boot up means go load the catalog, check the inventory, and then start the app. That may be way too slow to respond. But I think in general, Knative does a good job of saying, if you want a paradigm, like you want to respond to a webhook, you know what? I can wait a second or two to get a webhook. That is a genius idea. Lower environments where something isn't used all the time, wonderful idea. But the other thing we learned was this concept of minimum instances. How many should I keep around? And so I think when it comes to compute optimization, one clean strategy over auto-scaling is having over provisioning. Just have 3 there, and then you can do what we call calendar-based auto-scaling. So if I know customers are going to come in at 8 a.m., why dance? Well, you can just have it already. Mm-hmm. And so I think Knative gives you a framework to turn things off when they're not in use, request-based auto-scaling, which is very different than just general auto-scaling. And so for us, we keep those predicates, but then there's something missing. You need traffic management. You need something on top that says, how do I give something to a new version while keeping the old version around? And so I think this is where you start to have an API defined on what is a service versus like a revision and configuration. So Knative brings a much more opinionated way to think about what is an app and how should we give apps traffic. And this is well above than what Kubernetes does.
Yeah, so you mentioned Cloud Run, and I was thinking, because I know that you can basically do a lot of things with Cloud Run, but I was thinking if I do start doing pod sort of architecture using pods, and so at the moment with Kubernetes, you have the service, you have the kubedns that manage the network. So how do you manage, I mean, I was curious about when you mentioned that, so how do I manage a network if I spin up like a service? How can the reference of the service be resolved with Cloud Run? Because at the end, Cloud Run helps you to get different machines with different VMs. We're running different
It's all the same.
It's all the same. All right.
So think about it. Kubernetes has a default service mesh. We don't think of it that way. In the Kubernetes world, it plays some networking tricks. But this is the same networking from 30 years ago in all of the implementations. So in the Kubernetes model, it says, I created this app, and based on your labels, I'm going to group them into a logical service. I know the IPs of each of those pods. And if you want those, you can just ask Kubernetes API, give me the IP address of a pod, and you can then contact it directly. But almost no one does that by default. Most people go through a virtual IP, which is IP tables doing this on your behalf. So what is the IP tables equivalent in Cloud Run? That will be the Google Cloud Load Balancer. And so when we're spinning up different pods, not running in Kubernetes, by the way, I want to make that very clear. We're not using Kubernetes, but we can give you the same logical construct. So when you create a Cloud Run instance, the first thing you get is a dynamic DNS name that points to your instance group. And so if you're service A needing to talk to service B, you always go to the logical endpoint, not necessarily each individual app.
So if I have a Knative service, it means that everything that is, I'm putting it up, then there is a reference back to the Google load balancer to make the routing possible.
Yeah, so just like Kubernetes gives you one nice feature, which is something we're exploring adding to Cloud Run, which is if you just say app foo, Kubernetes will say, well, if you're only telling me the name is foo, I'm going to assume you're talking about the same namespace, and I'm just going to go look to see if there's a service called foo, and I'll resolve it to that BIP. This is just old school DNS.
Yep.
In Cloud Run, we don't quite do that yet. But you can imagine us doing the same thing. If you say service foo and Cloud Run, we could say, well, we're going to assume you're in the same project, and we're going to assume that you're talking about this thing called foo that you have running in Cloud Run, and we'll resolve it there. And if you want to be more specific, just like in Kubernetes, you can give additional qualifiers. No, I mean another namespace. Great. And if it's in another cluster, then the same challenge remains. You may need to go through a load balancer properly and just go through the same infrastructure you're used to.
So Kelsey was running today a keynote at Dynatrace Perform with one of the well-known employees of Dynatrace, Andreas Grabner, the DevOps activist working at Dynatrace. And so he just finished his keynote, and I just had a chance to interview him, so let's hear what he had in mind.
First day already at Perform. Amazing how time flies. And my highlight was my keynote with Kelsey, and that happened this morning, and it went really well. And
so
I'm
could
really
you
happy.
share some insights about your keynote without boundaries, please?
Exactly, yeah. I was just excited going right into it because it was a really cool thing. So basically, Kelsey Hightower, right? He is, I think, obviously, I call him Mr. Kubernetes, or as I introduced him on stage today, the Tony Hawk of Kubernetes, or the Tony Hawk of CNCF. What I really tried to get out of him is because he's doing always a great job in explaining things in simple terms, complex things in simple terms. One of the things that he did years ago on Twitter, he said, his career took off when he started to go back to the fundamentals, understanding the fundamental problems we have in our industry and then explaining it in simple terms. So one of the things we started with, he was actually explaining what observability means, what site reliability engineering is, why observability and security is so important, right? But he really explained it in a really cool analogy. And I can just tell everybody, check out the recording. He basically brought an anecdote from humans 10,000 years ago, and the first SRE was basically there making sure that the group of people is staying healthy, and is monitoring how many people go to bed at night and how many get up, and if somebody is missing, obviously there was some problem, some security breach. So the first SRE is the one that monitors, that figures out that the system is always healthy, and in case something is wrong, then he's on call and needs to make sure that the population stays healthy.
And if there's a lion who bought one of our colleagues, then you start to diagnose and say, that type of bite seems like a lion.
Exactly, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's like a little trace, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So very exciting week. In fact, if you look at all those announcements and all the things. So, from your perspective, what was the most exciting moment of the last 2 days?
I would say the most exciting moment was yesterday afternoon, that was Wednesday, when they announced Workflow and App Engine. Because Workflow and App Engine really show our users the power that Geigl, which is the underlying foundation where we bring all the observability data in one place, but you can now build code, apps on Dynatrace, which means your code runs on the data, close to the data, and you can combine this with workflows, which enables so many new opportunities. We as Dynatrace, we can only build so many use cases, right, that we think of, right? And also we don't want to solve all the problems in the world. We want to focus on what we're good in. So observability, certain adjacent use cases, but then we want to empower also now our customers and partners to build their own apps, because they have great ideas. And we saw a couple of examples already. I think our friends from Akamas already, they also already built the first Kubernetes optimizer app, right? This is something that we enable through the data that we have, and through apps we make it very simple now for everybody to bring in their use case in the Dynatrace platform.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned several interviews that we had today and yesterday. It's technically we are enabling innovation, because we bring you the data, we massage the data, we give you the tools so then you can query and do custom extractions of the data, and then with the workflow engine, then you can also start to imagine crazy stuff about it.
Yeah,
that's very exciting.
Exactly, it's data-driven orchestration, it's data-driven automation. So you can say, like what the example that they showed, something simple is time-driven. Every Monday morning, you want to basically look over your system and then figure out what you want to report back to management. Very simple. Other use cases, you can trigger these workflows based on data. Hey, all of a sudden we have a decline in user acceptance. And therefore you want to trigger a workflow that collects all the evidence, figures out who is responsible for these components. We now also have ownership information, which was another cool announcement today. So the workflow can figure out which components are impacted, who is responsible, and then is sending them a Slack message if it's development side, maybe another message if it's on the marketing side. So many cool use cases. Another one is around feature flagging. So we have progressive delivery, right? Alois showed today a workflow that we can use to deploy new features, or we can help you deploy your new apps, but then through the workflow we can control when we turn on a feature, then validate if the feature is good because we have the data about how the feature is received and how it's performing, and then decide roll it forward or roll it back.
Or even more, you can also, based on business decision, you can start to imagine have a decision say, oh, based on that event or that sales event, someone is not interested in my product, I want to enable that feature.
Yeah.
So then maybe the next user will have that cool feature that is possible with the combination of core Dynatrace plus feature flagging.
Yeah.
And by the way, it reminds me that we have a pretty cool open source project about the feature flagging.
Exactly.
So could you tell us about it?
Yeah, open feature. So it's not just our open source project, but we started it with some other companies like eBay, Canonical, and others are part of it. So open feature is really, I think, our answer to open telemetry, because open telemetry was trying to standardize the way we collect observability data. And with open feature, we want to standardize how developers are building feature flags into their code. So instead of hard coding feature flags for a particular framework or something that is custom built, we provide an SDK where a developer can develop against and then can plug in any type of feature flagging tool in the backend, whether it's Launch, Darkly, Split, there's so many great tools out there, right? So open feature, folks, if you're interested in, if you're going from blue-green deployments to Canary to feature flagging, open feature is the project to look into.
All right. So thank you so much, Andy. I hope that you at least enjoy this last day and probably the party.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's more other conference where you're going to come. By the way, where can the attendees see you on the next event?
I think I have been accepted at WTF is SRE in London. That's another event that is coming up. Also, I will be speaking at KCD Pakistan. So that's coming on Monday, so the 20th of February, talking actually about Captain, yet another open source project. Yeah, so these are some of the things. And just follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I typically post where we'll be speaking.
All right. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
One of the biggest announcements of the last 2 days is the Grail. So, Grail is not new. You probably have heard it on the social media, on various websites or various press release. Grail supports logs and business events. That's not new. But there was a couple of announcements, and Grail supports other signals. And one of the product managers, so Thomas Rothschaedl, had a session sharing the experience of using Grail with logs with one of the customers. So let's hear more about Grail with logs with Thomas.
Thomas Rothschaedl, I'm here with Dynatrace now since I think 8 years. Started as sales engineer and then transitioned over as product manager in the apps and microservice solution, basically handling topics around distributed tracing. And yeah, we had some great announcements today also.
So I think you had a session today.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was the session about?
Yeah, the session was basically about having all data in context, putting especially a focus on having logs in context of traces, and also how Grail can support this in the future then basically.
So it means that the session was mainly focused on Grail in general?
No, more on tracing. So basically why it's important to have all context. You have traces, metrics, logs in context, like also entity data, like metadata, user sessions especially there.
User session,
yeah.
Okay.
So one key point was there have been perhaps issues a log entry gives you not too much context about it. Something happens. And you want to understand how is the full context looking like? What did the user in the end user interface clicked? What was the interaction of him that led to that specific log entry, for instance?
So when people usually think about Grail, they think about logs in general. And here you mentioned a couple of other signals. So you mentioned traces, you mentioned different things. So could you tell us a bit more? So you have several signals supported.
Exactly. So basically what is the key point of Dynatrace is they put all the signals into context. So it's very easy. You have them at hand when you're interested. Okay, what led to that specific log message? Here we had in this example a log message that was shown here. This credit card type was not supported, but it tells you nothing basically. It doesn't tell you what did the user do. Did he then just put out the other credit card and swipe it with that. And that's what we basically can do. Or he did even get the proper error message. And in the example, I just saw the stack trace. So in the UI, not the best. That it's very doubtfully that he then choose the credit card again. And when we looked at the user session, we could exactly see where he left the page and never come back here.
So it means that you from a query perspective, I'm in Dynatrace. I can run Dynatrace query language of DQL for those who are not aware, and I can say, okay, I want to look at logs, and I want to cross-correlate with traces or with other signals.
Yeah, so what I have shown there was basically already backed into the UI. You do not need to make a query. So that's really where we guide the user through. It's nicely interacted there. But what is new, what we can do in the future is that we announced that right now we have logs in Grail, but we will also in the future have all the trace data in Grail. So that means that customer can also build their own queries on that and can slice and dice the data freely. Without any need of having this pre-indexed, they can access all the rich data that is there, even to solve, to analyze the unknown unknowns. Basically.
And that is pretty exciting because sometimes when you build some open telemetry trace, you can have, let's say, span attribute, and you add some events, and you can have some special values in the attributes. So would I be able to say in a query, say, oh, I'm interested only on the spans having this specific attributes and so on, and with this event or whatever?
Exactly. That's the big goal here in that case, that you can freely slice and dice the data as you want to have it. For instance, we just very often I got the question from customers, oh yeah, we see here the client IP and we had this attack or something like that. And we proactively allowed to access now this information and to find out what was happening there in a completely other use case that we perhaps anticipated it at first.
And it's super exciting because it opened doors to lots of potentials, I think. When you were just describing this, I was thinking of, it means that I can run tests and then I can make a query to say, I want to check that all my spans for all those type of layers of my traces are in the right response times. I can filter that, or I want to look at, for example, spans that are in specific errors and look at things. So this is very exciting. So it will basically help us to even have a stronger and more reliable automation at the end of the day.
Yeah, and what you should always think about, what is also, when you think about tracing, it's typically not about a single trace. It's about that we have highest fidelity data. We have huge amount of traces there. And that's especially very often you need to decide, okay, I don't want to have traces longer than a certain period of time. And with Grail, we now have this possibility also to store it longer, to have it at hand when you need it, even if you need to run an analysis a month or 2 months or even a year into the past.
So logs is there. I know that there is also the notion of these events also in Grail. But what will be the steps for covering more and more type of signals in that?
Very good question. So basically, what is the next metrics that come there? And shortly after metrics, we start with traces in Grail, but that will be a preview in Q2. So it will be a preview with selected customers at first, because we also want to get some feedback from them. What they are searching, how should then the trace-oriented query language, how should this be improved? Because we also see that there are just having the data is not really helping you. We also need to make here a good way forward to have a good user experience.
Makes sense.
So this will be in the second quarter. We'll announce this preview with selected customers, and then further on, hopefully during this year, we then roll it out broadly to any SaaS customer.
Yeah. So stay tuned. It means that 2023 would be the year of observability at the end.
Definitely.
Which is quite exciting for us because it will help us in many different directions in our project in general. So that's great. So logs is great, but what about traces? And what about open telemetry? Yeah, great news. I met in person Michael Kopp, one of the distinguished product manager of Dynatrace, and he's running all the open telemetry initiatives and Kubernetes as well. And we mainly talked with Michael about open telemetry, and especially the ability of querying also open telemetry traces using open telemetry in Davis in Dynatrace. So that was very exciting. So let's hear more about that.
So my name is Michael Kopp. I'm one of the long-term Dynatracers. I've been with the company for 30 years. I've actually done everything from sales engineering to a lot of blog writing, conferences, and for the majority I've been a product manager. And so I'm working on applications and OTel and these Kubernetes and these kind of things.
So you mentioned OTel, so that brings a lot of interest to me, and also Kubernetes for sure. But do you have any announcement or anything specific related to traces, metrics, or open telemetry in general?
So there's no big announcement about OTel today. What I can say though is that we are incrementally focusing on really getting all the OTel data easily and scalably and automatically into Dynatrace. So very soon we're gonna release a new iteration of the product screens. So and the goal is to give people that are using OTel all the value of Dynatrace that we give to customers that use the one agent. So things like automatic baselining for requests, right? Things like having all the data in context, like your metrics, your log, your events, all of those in context, right? And we're also expanding beyond traces. So we make sure that OTel metrics or other kinds of metrics are in context with that as well.
So that then it means that all the beauty and the automation that Dynatrace is providing out of the box with the traditional metrics that was collected by the one agent, it will be now accessible and available for all the open telemetry signals?
Yes, that is true. So the general strategy that we are following is that once the data is in Dynatrace, it no longer matters where it came from, right? So we want to provide all the value we can to all the data that comes into Dynatrace. So whether the traces come from the one agent or OTel or maybe some cloud integration, right? Whether the metrics come from one agent or OTel or Spring Micrometer, they should all be the same value. And the value that we believe in is that it's great having all of the data, but you need to have it in context. You want to have automatic baselining and alerting on top of it, and you want to be able to analyze it in context, right? And so where the one agent is great to automate the data collection, you can use it in combination with OTel to extend the data, or you can use OTel without it. Then it's maybe less automated collecting the data, but you still want to get all the value, right?
So we had a few minutes ago an interview with Thomas Rothschaedl, and he mentioned about Grail, the usage of logs and the power that it brings to. Is there also something related to Grail?
Yeah, so I think we just had the announcement like a couple of hours ago. The Bernd made that we are extending Grail to, I think we started with log and this event, and we're extending it to metrics. We're extending it to topology, so you can query your topology with DQL, and we're extending it to traces, right? So we're going to be in preview for traces in Grail in the second quarter, and actually that is very important for Dynatrace's OTel story, right? Because there's two sides to this. The one side is on the acquisition and the, let's say, the more ops focused monitoring, right? So you want to be able to acquire all that data, you want to bring it in context, you want to make it observable, as you say, but then you want to analyze it. And to do that, we basically completely reworked it and said we need to be able to bring all the traces, regardless of source, and the two most important ones being OneAgent and OpenTelemetry, and bring it into a single data layer. You might have heard Bernd speaking about the, what do we call it, the Dynatrace dictionary, right? And that is of course about metrics, that's also about log, but a big chunk of that is, if you look at trace data and if you look at OTel, there's so much stuff in there, and you want to be able to access all of that data in a unified format with a unified query language all in one. So Grail will complete that for us and will allow our customers to access and analyze all of their traces in a single language, in a single storage, in a single format.
And I think that's very exciting because today when I use traces in general, I always wanted to say, hey, I want to query or filter traces where I have a specific span attributes that I'm looking for,
Yeah.
or maybe the response time has deviated. So I'm looking for all those spans that are beyond that specific values, and also maybe say, hey, I have only on that specific node. So I think this support of DQL on other signals is just exciting for me. It's just bringing a lot of ideas, and I think it's really exciting.
Yes, I think it's very exciting. It's going to be very transformative for our company and for our customers. And if you remember, right, one of the things that Bernd talks about is indexless, right? And what does that mean for traces, right? As you say, there's a lot of attributes on it, but it's not just that. If it just were for, the standardized attributes that, are in the Rothschaedl spec or that are part of Dynatrace, all right. So, we could technically index those. But the point is about the applications attributes that the developers put in for their applications, right? Those, you could never know up front, right? Because they're going to be different in every organization, in every application, right? And so if you want to make those not just accessible, but queryable and filterable, then you need something like Grail to be able to deal with it. And on top of that, the thing that I'm really excited about, what I think Thomas also talked about, them being able not just to say, okay, we have a trace and we show the log, but just making a query that just queries traces and logs in one query. That's going to be really exciting.
Open telemetry, Kubernetes. Well, there's another great product manager at Dynatrace, Matthew Reider. So the secret sauce to get some features with Matthew is to buy some sushi. So you'll see that I just requested some feature requests with Matthew. So if you want me to ask more features, send me some sushi so that I can send it over to Matthew, so we can get even more features requests. No, so just teasing. So I just an interview with him. We talked about open telemetry specifically with Kubernetes. So let's hear more about what Matt has to say.
So hi Matthew, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very, very good.
Good.
Maybe before we start any question, could you introduce yourself to our community?
Absolutely. So I'm Matt Reider. I am one of maybe a handful of Americans living in Austria. I'm a product manager. For the last 3 years, I was mainly focused on Kubernetes, monitoring Kubernetes, and I'm now kind of transitioning, but still focused on Kubernetes. We have like a Kubernetes first attitude at Dynatrace. But now I'm more focused on ingesting data of different formats using the OpenTel collector, but again, in the context of Kubernetes. So that's what I'm up to.
So there was a couple of announcements today happening. One of them that was mentioned by Bernd was quite exciting, was the fact that Grail was not only limited to logs or busy events, it was going to be extended to other signals. So, and I was thinking of course, traces. So when it comes to traces, because I think it's exciting to be able to query and have the options to diagnose using a language like DQL. What is the current strategy on your end when it comes to open telemetry in Kubernetes environments?
I mean, DQL and Grail, and the fact that we just announced the ability to have a common query language across all of these different signals is huge. And within the context of Kubernetes, I mean, I can only just start to imagine all of the different things you could do. So being able to query traces in Kubernetes, I mean, we know that things get complicated in Kubernetes. You have a trace is going to pass through a service mesh. So it's got different hops that it's making. There's all this complexity within Kubernetes, not just for the apps that are running there, but also, if you wanted to trace what's happening inside of Kubernetes itself, that's, it's a smaller population of people who might be interested in that. But there's interesting things I could imagine where you might want to query DQL about the relationships between what's happening in Kubernetes from the standpoint of maybe the kubelet communicating with the API server at the same time that maybe problems are happening with containers restarting or pods being recreated. I mean, there's infinite numbers of things that I could imagine And I love the notebooks feature because it's all about forensics. And so having traces queryable with the combination of notebooks means you could use DQL for Kubernetes to really dive deep into an incident, for example.
And understand.
Yeah, you could if something happens and you really want to dig in and figure out, let's triage and diagnose this thing that happened. You could go off, figure out what the query might look like and then share it with your colleagues and explain it. Maybe in like a retrospective meeting, you could have the notebook there with, some trace queries to talk about what happened in Kubernetes itself from a platform standpoint, and also the apps that are running on it. I see it bringing tremendous value to Kubernetes users and DevOps folks.
So I'm going to take advantage of this session to push some feature requests.
You've been known to do that, yeah. On your trip to Vienna, I'm bribable. If you sushi dinners, what have you, we'll satisfy whatever feature requests you want within reason. Yeah.
No, so I was thinking with DQL, if I can query traces and then logs and metrics, and I was thinking, I'm having an issue with, let's say. I see that there's a problem with trace, and then I have the metadata, so I see, it's happening on that specific part.
Yes.
And I say, I would love to have the events, so having a way of sort of attaching somehow the Kubernetes events, which is more on the infrastructure part of our workload, but sometimes the Kubernetes events could basically impacting somehow the behavior of tracing. I know that I'm just pushing some ideas.
Yeah.
But I was thinking that there could be something interesting because at the end, we also mapping the app words and the sort of orchestrations and infrastructure side to the problem.
Today these things are possible in Dynatrace. You can, for instance, go to a unified analysis page and you could see an event like a deployment event where maybe the specification of a workload changed and this led to some problem. And maybe there are traces or logs that show you revealing information and are correlated to that problem. So that's all possible today, but what's really exciting about the announcements that we made today is that there's a common query language coming where you could do all sorts of interesting things to not, instead of having it correlated for you, maybe on Davis if there's a problem or a slowdown or something, you could do some explorations on your own that aren't necessarily tied to a problem. Just to see, again, just to do analysis, to see how well things are running, what the impact is of a new deployment. You have a deploy that you push using kubectl, it's now running, the workload's running, things look okay. But what's the general impact on the system? And what are the signals that were impacted by that specific workload? The fact that we bring in all of this context and topology gives us tremendous value. And now that we have this single way of sort of asking questions and those relationships are there, I see it as a very unique thing within the industry. So today was a really great day to be an employee of Dynatrace because I saw all these things that we've been working on are now publicly shared. And we can finally speak freely about some of the potential that we have. Not some of it isn't going to happen right away. Some of it's, it'll be within a reasonable time frame, but we'll be sharing more and more about all the things that were discussed today. And in the Kubernetes context, I think there's a lot of possibility.
More topics related to Kubernetes. Well, how can we get more information? The best way, of course, is to meet and interview the two product managers running the Kubernetes topic at Dynatrace. I'm referring to Alois and Florian Geigl. So they were basically had a breakout session this afternoon on Kubernetes and all the things that Davis is able to pick up from a Kubernetes perspective with the out-of-the-box alerts. So let's hear more about what the latest news about Kubernetes and also the report that we are soon going to release about Kubernetes. Here at Dynatrace Perform, Perform, it means that there are some specific announcements. I mean, a lot of things have been announced during the last 2 days, but specific to Kubernetes, do we have anything specific?
You want to take that?
Sure. So in terms of announcements, I mean, the majority of announcements were, of course, specific to our new platform, right? With the new experience, everything in Grail, traces, metrics, the notebooks to collaborate, like in your teams, new dashboards, automation engine, app engine, right? So they were not really Kubernetes specific. But the beauty is that when we build Kubernetes observability, we can leverage all the things to actually have more powerful UI, more powerful means to basically cover all the use cases that you have for Kubernetes observability. So that's great. And since Kubernetes is kind of like a platform which touches many different roles and many different interests of people, it's super important to have all the information and all the data in one place. So I think for us, all the announcements is great, kind of like for Kubernetes observability going forward.
Because when I look at the notebook, the first thing I say, okay, so I have an issue, I have a pattern on my cluster going on and on and on. So I want to do a query crossing different signals to sort of helping to walk through and explaining me why I'm having this. Are we planning in the future to, because at the moment we have our specific Kubernetes screens that are in the, say, previous UI, I would say. Are we going to enhance those screens in the next coming month or weeks?
I'll take that one. It's
sure.
Okay for you. So there's a lot of things in the plans actually. So we're going to improve those screens. By far, we're also really reconsidering how users can interact with our UI. So we're thinking about doing some UX improvements that we see that there's space for improvement, I would say. And we're also thinking a lot about integrating more signals, making it even more easy for people to understand if there's fishy things ongoing. You know, like if you're running out of node resources, so to say, might be a problem for you, might not be a problem for you. But if all your nodes are completely booked with CPUs, for sure it looks fishy. So it's something that you might have a look at.
And I remember that that sometimes when we facing some problems, we could have some conditions, or we have our nodes that could be in a certain situation, and sometimes to find that information, we have to run several commands. So do we have a plan to speed up the analysis and help to point out those problems in a more easy way in Dynatrace?
Right, so we recently introduced the out-of-the-box alert that are already covering a lot of these things, like node condition are considered for these alerts and stuff like that. What we are still thinking there is to have Davis learn more patterns, more root causes over there. Like if your pod is banning, we want to really make it easy for you to understand why it is banning, why is your workload not progressing and stuff like that. So there's a lot in the works and in our thinking currently.
Yeah. And I think also adding to what you said, right? Like this out-of-the-box monitors which end up in an alert and you get notified, right? But very often it's also important to just have kind of like an easy-to-grasp view on the health of Kubernetes objects. Like no matter if it's a node, a pod, a workload, right? You want to really kind of like with a glimpse of an eye, like in 10 milliseconds understand whether my workload, my payment service, my pod or whatever is healthy, which kind of like means it's green or it's yellow. Something is, as you say, it is fishy, but it's not a problem yet. Maybe it will never become a problem because Kubernetes takes care of restarting a pod or something. These are also things that we want to improve and make available to our customers.
I had a question. Is at the moment the DQL or the Grail, I would say, supports logs, supports the metrics. We should have more and more signals coming in with topology and other stuff. And I was always wondering, say, hey, especially when we deal with Kubernetes, if you mention we have a crash to back off or we have a pending pod, sometimes the crash to back off could be related to some problems to our app, and maybe the app is sending some logs. Would we have in the future the ability to, for example, cross-correlate and say, oh, I'm looking for the pod, let's say cart, and I'm looking for the events crash to back off, and I want to have the logs attached to that, so then I can somehow in a one query understand what's happening. Is this something we have the plan to do, or at the moment we are adding those signals one by one, and then once we have everything, we can provide that type of a feature for our users?
I mean, in one of the announcements yesterday, there were so many announcements, but one of the announcements was that DQL is able to deal with Smartscape data. So you can not only query for logs or query for events or query for metrics or query for traces, you can also use our topology, like what's in the Smartscape, how things are connected, and write your query based on that information. Kind of like to come back to your example. So what happened to the cart? Like this specific workload in my namespace, in cluster, in US East 1. And what happened there, and also correlate and filter specific events, filter for specific logs, all in one query. So the great thing here is that you look at one thing that you need to take care of, like the cart service, and in the query you can look for all the stuff that you need about this single thing, right? So this is when we think about context, we always mean that thing, right? So we know what are the logs related to the cart service, what are the traces that are somehow related to the cart service, the events, and even like how they are connected with each other. So yes, the DQL will make this possible.
So did you have any breakout sessions during the last 2 days?
We had a great breakout session. We had a ton of fun, to be really honest here.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about the reports that we did. So our team did a lot of data analysis of anonymized customer data, and we even contributed to that to the CNCF report. So there's a ton in there, a lot of understanding what folks are running on Kubernetes, how Kubernetes is moving to the cloud. Like from last year to this year, there was a big shift of Kubernetes clusters going to the cloud. I also had a great demo. I think people enjoyed it. So we talked about the new out-of-the-box alert we introduced in there.
Were you blessed by the gods of the demo? The demo god?
Yes, I think everything worked out.
Yeah, sure.
But we were prepared.
Yeah, we were prepared. We were
like
totally
crazy.
prepared, yeah.
Like I think I felt never prepared as last as yesterday, right?
I slept really well before that day, and that usually never happens. And if that happened, it means I'm very well prepared. So I think that was amazing. And also, Alois also shared what's upcoming on our roadmap in the end. So folks were really amazed. We got a lot of questions afterwards. So I think it was a huge success, our breakout.
One great thing about Dynatrace recently that I discovered, and it's not new, is the notion of busy events. Busy events is a way of collecting some events from a request or from a message and then track it. What you say, what's the use case? Well, if I'm placing an order, I can keep track on the progress of a user going through the funnel. So I'm paying, I'm adding product in the cart, and then you can follow that. And one of the product manager running the initiative is Klaus. And Klaus is not only running that initiative, he's also part of all the new things that are being announced this week. So the app engine, the workflow engine, and all other things that provide new applications with the BIS flows and also the carbon footprint application. So let's hear about what Klaus has to say. So hi Klaus, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, I'm great.
So maybe you can briefly introduce yourself to our community.
My name is Klaus Enzenhofer. I'm the product lead for Business Analytics Solution. And yeah, Business Analytics in Dynatrace with Geigl, with App Engine, with Workflows really got a booster. Plus the two apps that we launched today that you have not, maybe you haven't heard, but we have launched also a Business Flow app and a Carbon Insights app, helping people to reduce their carbon footprint. It's like great new stuff that is coming out of our area.
So you mentioned two apps, the Business Flow apps. Could you explain a bit what's all about? Because Business Flow could be very large. So for people who's not aware of what is it, could you give us some details?
Going back to the business events, who are feeding the business flows. A lot of time what we've seen on dashboards is single value tells. people are like, this is my key transaction, this is my SLO for this key transaction. But when you think about it from a business perspective, yeah, maybe this one key transaction goes right, but ultimately you need to have like 5, 10 of these key transactions in a row to actually work out. And if there is something going wrong, let's say you order something and you're not getting your grocery delivered, you want to know per individual order what is happening. And we have now delivered in November with the business events the precision and the changes in the one agent needed, the precision, the deep dive into the data, into the payload data, to deliver that data. And with Business Flow app, we now deliver the ability to chain them together to a longer process, to give you the insight like, is there something wrong with the overall process, or is it just, another hiccup that you can recover?
So, if I understand you well, so we already provided a couple of months ago the ability of keeping track of various events in the funnel. So, funnels. Say I'm ordering an item on a retailer. So first there is all the sales aspects, paying, and then before the product comes in my house and I had it in my hands, there are lots of different steps in the process. And now our users are able to send those events and be able to keep track on all the chain of ordering to delivering the product to the end of the users.
Exactly. That's it.
And so now with the fact that we're able to ingest those events, this flow will basically visualize the flow in a more graphical way, so you can understand where you're basically stuck or where is the bottleneck.
Right, because in between these steps, let's stick to the e-commerce example here, there can be hours in between. From, hey, I got my confirmation email, to somebody actually putting the package together for you, can take a little bit. But it's important that you get those insights from all the different systems that Dynatrace is monitoring anyway. And the cool thing about it is why Dynatrace, you would say, is like, the beauty is everything stays in context. Such a business event is, you can drill down to the host, the individual view path, potentially, to do the deep analysis that Dynatrace is famous for. So all the observability use cases are there, but you're now turning the observability data with these business events and giving it an upgrade that you can talk to the line of business. Hey, this server is down. Guess what? That's why nobody is transacting anymore. This is why all the packages are stacking up at the warehouse, but not being picked up because there is a process stuck somewhere. That's the insights that we are bringing here to the table.
And also we are technically able to say, hey, this service is down and you're losing that amount of money at the moment. So you can measure that.
We also, with the Business Flow app, want to give you the insight where you say like, hey, I have there a problem. What will be the impact on my call center? Give it like, what is a minute worth in dollars that somebody is hanging around on your call center hotline? How many calls you would expect? And we derive from the problem, this is the amount of money you're spending on call center calls now. And we also, I was just in my breakout together with Mitchell and Butlers. And I was like, okay, let's think it the next way. Let's avoid this call. Can we automate, remediate immediately? And they have a fantastic use case for that. Let me tell you more about it. The first thing Mark did with business events was he wanted to know about table reservations. How long in advance do people book their table for birthday party, whatever?
And we are at Valentine's Day, so they probably got some stats about it, I guess.
Yeah. But it's like, but what happens to them sometimes? People are getting dormant, like working through the reservation process, and nothing happens there anymore. Now what they are doing is now they're capturing this reservation process, and if there is a customer being dormant due to the real-time insights that Dynatrace can deliver, they are just very simply triggering communication to those people. So they are triggering using the workflow engine that we launched to trigger in their customer 360 solution an outreach. Go there with the user IDs, like, hey, this is dormant. Does this user want to interact with us as Mitchell and Butlers? If that was his preferences in the mobile app, they basically ping him and say like, hey, we saw that you tried to, can we help you? Are there any questions we can help you with? Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I mean, at least that it provides more value to the end user and at least provide a lot of great features for the customers. That's awesome.
And that's the customer experience that ultimately matters, because happy customers are transacting with you and you're making more money.
There's another topic that you mentioned is the carbon footprint application. So that brings a lot of interest. So how do you, what are type of information you provide in that carbon footprint application?
The carbon footprint application is very important these days. I mean, everybody tries to save the world with reducing the carbon footprint. And the problem that IT leaders have these days is there is European legislation on the way. And the European Union will force every company, almost every company, to report on their emissions. Yeah, and guess what? IT, depending on the size of your IT system, can have a significant carbon footprint impact because it runs on electricity. What we did is we use the power of all the observability data that we have there anyway. We know the CPU, memory, disk, network metrics. Plus we know which CPU architecture is running there. And that way we have developed algorithms that allow you to say what individual piece in the entire IT landscape of your enterprise is producing worth of CO2 while it's running, because it makes a difference whether you run at 10% CPU usage or 100%. You want to optimize that, and we give now everybody the power to optimize their IT systems, even with recommendations.
All right, so lots of content, lots of interview. That's a big live stream for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will produce a dedicated episode about the atmosphere, the surrounding, and provide more interviews to you. So thanks for watching. And of course, if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. So see you soon for another episode.